Mike, for that kind introduction. It's great to be here, and thank you to MPP Michael Harris for arranging this opportunity to talk about the approach that the Progressive Conservative team is going to take at Queen's Park and our priorities both locally and provincially. And of course, it's always great to see Peter Braid, who's been a great public servant in the area, and best of luck to Peter on October 19th. I should say one WestJet story. First of all, it's great to see WestJet's success and to see the expansion. And I know locally the fact that the new destinations are being embarked upon is a great thing for the airport, and the airport provides so many business opportunities for the community as well. But I've known your helper Andy Gibbons for about 15 years, and he's about the biggest diehard Ottawa Senators fan you can meet anywhere. And so I have to get you a picture. A few years ago, when he was in love with his Senators, we photoshopped the picture of Andy in a Maple Leaf jersey and sent it to his closest 300 friends, but blind copied it saying Andy's picked up a new team. And the worst part, people stopped him on the street asking him about it, but he remains a bigger fan of WestJet, and it's great to continue to hear of all the success that you've had. Today I wanted to talk about where we are in Ontario and what we can do to get this province back on track. Today in Ontario, we just had our credit downgraded by Standard & Poor's this spring, and obviously when your credit gets downgraded, that is potentially higher interest rates, and that's potentially less room to invest in what we care dearly about. Bloomberg did an article just recently in July saying that Ontario is the most indebted subnational government, not just in Canada, not just in North America, in the world. We've lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. That's where we are in Ontario today. And as much as we can bemoan that, the question that arises is how can we get Ontario back on track? We're once again the most prosperous province in Canada. We're a leader in Confederation, not a province that is receiving equalization payments. And I thought I'd share a story actually from India, because you mentioned I've been there more than a few times, and there was a chief minister in one of the places you mentioned, Gujarat, who I think provided an example. The chief minister in Gujarat at the time, Narendra Modi, the state of Gujarat was struggling. They had earthquakes and economic development was challenged. And when he got elected, he said you need to have affordable energy, you need to have good transportation corridors, and you need to cut red tape. And he said, once you get the fundamentals correct, you can market your state. And he got his fundamentals right. He built a huge dam and enhanced hydropower. He built North American style roads. In India, which if you've been to India, having North American style roads is unique. He built an international airport, and he cut red tape. And he took those fundamentals and he went and pitched his state everywhere in India. And there was a big company, Tata, that's one of the biggest companies in the world, the largest auto company in India, and they were struggling to get their approvals in Calcutta. It's going to take them a year. He called them up and said, you'll have your approvals in 3 days if you move to Gujarat. They moved with 50,000 jobs. This is a competition for jobs. And the sad reality is we're losing that competition in Ontario, where someone like Narendra Modi in Gujarat went and chased jobs and chased opportunity. We're the ones being poached. I've talked to municipal officials in Windsor, and they tell me about jobs being poached from Michigan. I heard stories from the Brockville area of us losing jobs south of the border. That is unacceptable. We have to get our fundamentals correct on energy, on red tape, and on transportation corridors. On energy, I don't think there's an area that the government has mismanaged more. We have energy prices in Ontario, double the price of Manitoba, double the price of Michigan, almost triple that in Quebec. And everywhere I go in the province, I hear examples of businesses that have left Ontario because of energy prices. The Green Energy Act has been an unmitigated disaster, resulting in this year alone us giving away $1 billion in power. And that isn't even reference the fact that we've already lost $1 billion on the gas plant scandal, $2 billion on the smart meters scandal, and the $80 million that the Ombudsman discovered on the missed billings. And the solution to this? The government signs more green energy contracts, despite the fact we have an oversupply and a demand that does not require that. And we're signing contracts for 25 years and double the price that those same contracts are being signed in Quebec. You know, I look at what the government's doing now in Hydro One, and I worry that's going to be another decision we're going to regret. The sale of Hydro One, there's not going to be proper oversight. They took measures last spring to remove the Ombudsman's ability to have any oversight on the evaluation of Hydro One. And the reality is, you're going to see energy prices rise. We're going to lose increasing control of energy prices in Ontario. And by the government's own estimates, we're going to see energy prices rise by 42% over the next 3 years. How do we remain competitive when you have energy prices that are so out of whack? You know, when I was in Eastern Ontario, Napanee lost their plant expansion with Goodyear because of energy prices. You know, when I was traveling in Northern Ontario, I read about Xstrata leaving for Quebec because of energy prices. It happens far too often. On red tape, boy have they got it wrong on red tape. We have 354,000 regulations. We are a haven for red tape. You know, I just had a by-election in Simcoe North, and I was talking to the mayors in Midland and Penetanguishene, and they told me that to get an approval from MTO for a driveway on a provincial roadway, it took 3 years. 3 years. In Northern Ontario, I traveled with Vic Fidelli to the Ring of Fire, and in terms of reference on an EA for a mining project, which was supposed to take 45 days, now it takes 2 years. That's the problem with red tape. There's a cost associated with red tape. And let me say, I was proud to be in the House of Commons with Peter Braid a few years ago when we voted for a motion put forward by Tony Clement that said every new regulation created, an existing one will be deleted so that red tape does not grow currently in Canada. That's not the case at Queen's Park. We actually had a red tape reduction secretariat at Queen's Park that was created when the late Wayne Wetlaufer was an MPP, and Dalton McGuinty got rid of the red tape reduction secretariat. I want to send a message to business that we'll get that right for Ontario. There will not be a regulatory burden that is that much more significant than our competitors in Manitoba, Quebec, Michigan, or New York. We need to make an Ontario that can compete. And you look at transportation corridors. You know, I'm glad WestJet is the sponsor of the lunch today, because I think the government has shown no interest in marine transit. They've shown a disregard for the challenges in the aviation industry, and gridlock and missing transportation corridors plague the province. But on aviation in particular, the change that Liberals brought up in the budget a year ago results in a 148% increase on the tax on aviation fuel. So every airline company is just going to choose to fuel up elsewhere. We lose. The reality is businesses can make choices. And when they made that announcement, guess who put out a press release? The Buffalo Airport, hailing it as a great day for Buffalo. That's not the job of the Premier of Ontario, to create a great job for the Buffalo Airport. Our job is to make Ontario competitive. You know, you look at missing transportation corridors, the Ring of Fire, where there's a $60 billion opportunity, they promised a road now for 10 years, and there's no road. And instead they point fingers and blame others. And you wonder why nothing is happening up there. Is because of that inaction. You know, I look at the Windsor-Detroit Bridge. That only happened because the Prime Minister insisted we had to build that bridge. We need to take the same approach with the Ring of Fire. Gridlock in the GTA, gridlock in urban Ontario, and you can actually measure this, is amongst the worst in North America for large urban areas. And I know locally, I'd be remiss not to mention, because Michael Harris only mentions it about 10 times a week at Queen's Park, GO Train services if the Liberals are re-elected, you may have GO Train services in 2080. And maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the fact that they can push it back 5 or 10 years when you have suffocating gridlock here. I came for a barbecue last night. I left Queen's Park at 2:30, didn't get here until well after 5 o'clock. Gridlock is suffocating, and if you want to be able to retain and recruit businesses to the greater Kitchener-Waterloo area, you have to have a solution to that. And we want to make sure we get the fundamentals correct on energy, on red tape, and transportation. But one of my bigger worries right now with the way the Liberals are governing at Queen's Park is that they're bringing on new challenges. New challenges that are going to make it more difficult to create an environment for jobs. And that's what I want to do. To be competitive, you got to create an environment for jobs. And so anything that makes it more difficult to build a small business, to create jobs, is not in the best interest of the province. And the biggest campaign being undertaken right now by Kathleen Wynne is she wants to bring in a payroll tax. And let me say how impressed I am that the leading opposition to Kathleen Wynne's payroll tax in the province of Ontario is the Chambers of Commerce. 57 Chambers of Commerce signed a joint letter saying that this would be a job killer. Thank you for taking on that important opposition. Because Kathleen Wynne tries to pass it off as a partisan issue, saying that this is about pensions. This isn't about pensions, this will kill jobs. The own Ministry of Finance internal documents says this will kill 54,000 jobs. And I would note, I read the Chamber report and it said 44% of your members would cut employees or reduce benefits. There are great benefits available, there are great private plans available, but the notion we're going to put a massive payroll tax on business at a time when the economy is still fragile makes no sense. And I can't wait to be at Queen's Park to challenge the Premier on the fact that not only the Chambers of Commerce have said this will kill jobs in Ontario, but 150 leading businesses, including 3 of the biggest auto companies in North America, who said it will kill jobs and drive business investment away from Ontario. In June we had the CEO of Fiat Chrysler attend a speech, an event in Toronto, and they asked him how come he wasn't making investments in Ontario. And he actually responded and said, and this is a visiting CEO, he said, the politics at Queen's Park have created conditions that don't welcome investment. There's no greater indictment on performance of Kathleen Wynne's government when you've got a CEO saying he'd rather invest anywhere else in North America except for Ontario. And when pressed what he meant, he said the payroll tax and energy prices. We have to get it right. I want to be able to market Ontario to the world and say, this is where you want to be. Ontario had that honor. Ontario used to lead. And we can again if we get our fundamentals correct. But I wanted to close before we go to questions and answers by also touching upon something else. And that's, we're going to take a different approach at Queen's Park. I've said probably 1,000 times in the last year during the leadership campaign, during the by-election, during my first few months as leader of the party, there's no monopoly on a good idea. And one of my criticisms about the way politics was conducted at Queen's Park is everything the Liberals would vote for, the Conservatives would vote against. Everything the Liberals would do, everything the Conservatives do, the Liberals would vote against. And the parties, it was almost an atmosphere of distrust. And I look at the way Michael Harris has governed himself, and he works with everyone to benefit this city. And that's the approach we have to take on a provincial level. We're not going to vote against things the Liberals bring up simply for partisan reasons. We're not going to have partisan blinders on. If an idea makes sense for Ontario, we'll back it. If it doesn't make sense for Ontario, we'll ferociously criticize it. I know on my first day as leader of the party, the Liberals announced an agreement with Quebec to reduce inter-provincial trade barriers. I thought that's a good idea, so I put out a press release praising the government on that move. And the Queen's Park Press Gallery asked me they told me they've never seen an opposition party by press release praise the government. And I said, well, if they do something right, we'll acknowledge it. The NDP, had a bill on better access to PTSD treatment. And I wholeheartedly support it. Because PTSD is real. We have to do more to help those first responders who are sacrificing their own health for the betterment of the community. And I think when we take that approach and we show to Ontario that our driving force and our driving desire is to serve the best interest of this province, putting aside partisanship, I think people are ready for that approach. People want sincerity. They want a party that will be authentic, and we're going to work towards doing that every day at Queen's Park. And because of the by-election last Thursday, I now have the honor to be at Queen's Park on Monday, and I can't wait to get in there. I can't wait to highlight our progressive conservative team, and I couldn't do it with a better MPP and a better colleague like Michael Harris. So thank you for hearing me out today, and I look forward to the questions.
We have a few minutes, so do we have any questions for Michael? Sorry, Mike. Oh, Mike. No, we'll stick with you. Back.
Rob Esselman from the University of Waterloo. I noticed yesterday on your critics list that you gave yourself education and TCU as your critics portfolios. So there's a number of us that were excited to hear something in your speech about education. So I'm just wondering, as the critic, what your priorities are in education and TCU.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I took on that critic responsibility myself because I think it is one of the most important areas, and it's one of the most sensitive areas where decisions that are made today affect the province in years ahead. So there's a number of things that I have an interest in on education. I'll just touch. You can almost have your own speech on education, but I will touch upon a few. I want to link education to employment, and I want to work with colleges and universities to make sure that we have that goal as a mindset. I want to have a conciliatory relationship with educators, with the Progressive Conservative Party. I look at the challenges we have today in education. I want financial literacy to be mandatory in the school curriculum. I want to give young people the tools for the job market they're about to enter. And when we look at our education system today, I look at the Nordic model, look at the German model, and they link employment to education. I think far too often we don't do that in Ontario. And I'll give you an example. Last year, we graduated 9,000 teachers for 5,000 teaching positions. Nothing against teachers. My mother and my aunt are teachers. But the notion we were having 4,000 new graduates take on, in many cases, student loans, under the impression they're going to have a job in the field and not have a job and not be able to use what they spent their time and money on is wrong. Conversely, I was up at Cambrian College in Sudbury, 24 graduates of the Powerline program, 300 job offers. I want us to have a conversation in this province. How does education become an incubator for prosperity, an incubator for jobs? And I wanted to take this critic portfolio on myself so that I could tour every college and university in the province and get their suggestions of how we can ensure that the post-graduation employment is at the highest possible rate. Okay, thank you for the question. And obviously Garfield Dunlop was a fierce critic of the College of Trades, and I think in some cases, like on hair salons, he highlighted how there was taxes and government regulation where really none belonged. But in fairness, right now there is a review going on the College of Trades, and I was critical when the party previously announced they were against the budget before reading the budget. And I want to read the report on what the recommendations are when it comes out. And many of us have reservations about how the College of Trades was run, but I think it's only fair to let the review take place, and we'll judge the report on if it effectively deals with those concerns. And in terms of the skilled trades, obviously we need a greater emphasis on the skilled trade. That's where jobs are today, and we need to make sure that we get young people into the skilled trades.
So one question, we were on our radio show today, we were talking with Liam McGinty from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and a number of the issues that both the Ontario Chamber and from a local perspective that the business community are starting to feel in a very real way. WSIB premiums and how that is impacting. That's another one of those. It's insurance, but it effectively is a payroll tax, and it's really burdensome, especially for small, medium-sized business, and depending on your sector, can be prohibitive for either staying in business or certainly growing. So just maybe a couple comments on those WSIB, and then same thing with Ontario registered pension.
Well, on the Ontario Registered Pension Plan, it's pretty straightforward. We're against it. We want to cancel it if we were elected. It's not in the best interest of Ontario to have a payroll tax. It would put us at a disadvantage to other jurisdictions. We'd be the only province with a forced payroll tax. And frankly, the way it's being set up, if you trust the Liberals for 30 years, you might have an additional pension benefit. I'm not going to trust the Liberals for 30 years. Just look at the fact that a year ago selling Hydro One wasn't on the block, and all of a sudden it is. So a payroll tax is not in the best interest of the province. So this ORPP, they call it a pension plan, but it's a payroll tax, and we're calling it for what it is. And I appreciate the Chamber's leadership on this. In terms of the WSB, I realize there's a lot of challenges there and a lot of complaints on both sides. We're embarking upon our policy process in March, driving a party policy convention in Ottawa, and from that policy convention, we're going to meet with stakeholders in every community. And I know there's been almost 3 or 4 different proposals for how to deal with that, some more drastic than others, and I think it's fair to the party to make sure that we actually go through that policy process before we highlight what we believe is the best path forward.
I want to thank you on behalf of the crowd, Patrick. I really appreciate you coming. And this, I hope, will be the first of many.